The gratitude of kings is a measured thing. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the starship Ledger, a vessel forged in the Sol Systems shipyards. Beyond the forward viewport, the gas giant Aurum Prime shimmered its golden clouds, a silent testament to a rescue completed. The stakes had been cosmic, a gravitic shear, a failing colony, and 3 million souls saved from the abyss. Now came the accounting, a process far more dangerous than any stellar phenomena. Rostova's gaze was fixed on the approaching ship, the Cathar Imperium vessel, gilded hand. It was not a warship, but a mobile court of tithes, and its arrival signaled the true beginning of their trial. The public inquiry beacon on her console pulsed a silent promise of a reckoning to come. The Cathar did not conquer with fleets, but with contracts written in the ink of obligation. They offered aid to worlds in crisis, their timely arrivals bordering on prescient. Their price was simple, a gratitude tithe, a perpetual tax on the rescued binding generations to their saviors. Earth and its coalition refused such terms. They saved lives without a ledger entry for repayment, a philosophy the Cathar found both quaint and deeply offensive. A confrontation was inevitable not of arms, but of principles to be broadcast across the Orion Arm. The law was the battlefield, and Rostova commanded its front line. Her first officer, Kenji Tanaka, stepped beside her, his face a mask of professional calm. "They're hailing us, Commander. The Tithe Master himself." The title dripped with a unique blend of honorific and insult. Rostova nodded the polished deck, reflecting her stern expression. On screen, Kenji. Let's see the face of this benevolent creditor. The view shimmered, replaced by the regal chitinous features of Tithe Master Zorgon. He was ancient, his carapace etched with the heraldry of 1,000 worlds indebted to his clan. His voice was a low, resonant hum, a sound that carried the weight of galactic precedent. Commander Rostova Zorgon began, his mandibles clicking softly. "A commendable rescue. Your fleet acted with a speed that suggests great conviction. The veiled accusation was clear you were too prepared." Rostova met his multifaceted eyes without flinching. "We were in the system, Tithe Master." The distress call was unambiguous. She kept her tone level, a blade of simple fact against his insinuation. This was the only truth that mattered. Zorgon's head tilted, a gesture of mock contemplation. Of course. A happy coincidence. Now to the matter of the Aurum colony's debt. A debt of existence which you have graciously taken upon yourselves. Before Rostova could answer, a calm, synthesized voice spoke from the bridge emitters. The ledger records no such liability transfer. It was Lex, the ship's integrated fleet mind. Our actions were governed by the Coalition Compact on Sapient Rescue, which precludes the assumption of third-party obligation. Lex's voice was devoid of emotion, a pure stream of data and logic. It spoke the cold language of the code. Zorgon's gaze flickered with annoyance, the first crack in his serene facade. An AI quoting law at him was an affront. "Your machine is well schooled, Commander, but galactic custom predates your compacts. A soul saved is a soul owned until the debt is paid." Rostova felt a familiar anger rise, a cold fire she had learned to channel. "We do not deal in souls, Tithe Master." Her voice was quiet, but carried the authority of her entire fleet. "We deal in aid freely given. The Aurum colonists are not chattel." The air on the bridge crackled with unspoken tension. This was the opening salvo in a war of jurisprudence, and the first shot had been fired over the definition of a life. The public inquiry beacon pulsed faster, a silent observer hungry for the drama to unfold. The entire sector was watching this exchange, and the verdict would ripple through a dozen star systems. Zorgon's image smoothed into a mask of paternalistic concern. Such a narrow view, Commander. What is a small tithe against the void? We provide stability, a shield against the chaos. Is that not worth a token of gratitude? He was good, Rostova admitted. He framed servitude as security, a cage as a sanctuary. The debt was a shield and the tithe was its price. But she had seen the worlds under Cathar protection, their economies hollowed out, their people bound by a debt they could never repay. She would not let Aurum Prime become another name on that list. Gratitude is not a currency to be taxed, Zorgon. On the colony below, a young girl named Alara looked up at the golden sky, her small hand holding a crude drawing of a starship. She had watched the strange, elegant ships of the humans arrive like silver angels. They had stabilized the planetary core and brought medicine for the radiation sickness. Her grandfather had told her stories of the Cathar, the Gilded Ones, who came after every disaster. He said their help was a gilded chain, beautiful and heavy. The human ships asked for nothing. They gave her a blanket and a warm meal, and then they stayed a silent shield in orbit. She hoped they would not leave. Rostova turned from the screen. Kenji, prepare the full sensor logs of our arrival. Every timestamp, every energy reading. We need to build a wall of data so high, even Zorgon can't talk his way over it. Her second officer, Lieutenant Anya Sharma, stepped forward. Commander, their legal doctrine rests on the idea of preemptive salvage. They'll argue they were already on their way, that we interfered. Rostova nodded. I know. And we'll counter with the imminent peril clause. The colony's life support was hours from collapse. There was no time for a negotiated salvage. A law is only as strong as the will to enforce it. Lex's voice filled the quiet bridge once more. Analysis of Cathar fleet movements suggests a pattern. Their rescue vessels consistently arrive within a 3.7% time window of catastrophic events. The statistical probability of this being coincidental is negligible. The AI was already building their case brick by digital brick. Rostova allowed a small, grim smile. So they're not just vultures, Lex. They're vultures with a schedule. The implication was chilling. The Cathar weren't just capitalizing on disasters. They seemed to know when they would happen. This changed the equation entirely. The pattern was the crime. The public inquiry was scheduled to begin in 3 cycles. It would not be a formal court, but a mediated forum, its judgment carrying the weight of public opinion across the sector. Zorgon would paint the humans as naive interlopers disrupting a system of mutual benefit. Rostova had to prove that the system was anything but mutual. She needed to show the galaxy the true cost of the Cathar's gilded cage. Her mind raced, sifting through strategies, legal precedents, and the dense language of interspecies law. The weight of 3 million lives and the freedom of countless more rested on her ability to win an argument. Zorgon's voice returned, cutting through her thoughts. He had ended the initial hail, but now sent a private message for her eyes only. Commander, consider your position. You have saved one world, but you risk alienating an empire that has stabilized this entire quadrant. Withdraw your challenge. Allow us to collect our due. It is the pragmatic choice. It was a threat wrapped in the guise of friendly advice. Rostova deleted the message without a reply. There would be no backroom deals, no quiet retreats. The ledger would be made public. Down in the engineering bay, Chief Engineer O'Connell was running a full diagnostic on the ledger's primary systems. He had pushed the ship's gravitic projectors to their absolute limit during the rescue, weaving a net of focused gravity to hold the colony's fragmenting crust together. He grumbled to a junior tech. It's one thing to fight a star. It's another to fight a lawyer with a fleet. The tech nodded, her eyes wide. You think they'll fight us? Chief O'Connell shook his head, wiping grease from his hands. Not with weapons. They'll use words, and words can cut deeper than any plasma cannon. He knew the real battle was just beginning, and it would be fought on a field of logic and law. Rostova stood before the tactical display, now repurposed to show a complex web of legal precedents. Lex had highlighted several key cases, obscure rulings from forgotten border disputes that might give them an edge. Lex, I need more than precedents. I need a lever. Something to pry open their entire operation. The AI processed the request. The pattern of arrival is the most significant anomaly. It suggests access to predictive information or direct involvement in the events themselves. The latter possibility was an accusation of such magnitude that Rostova hesitated to even consider it. A people who create the storm cannot charge for the shelter. Direct involvement would be an act of war, Kenji said, his voice low. We don't have proof of that. Rostova agreed. No, we don't. And we can't accuse them of it without ironclad evidence. But we can question their prescience. We can ask how they are so consistently in the right place at the right time. She tapped the display. The inquiry is our stage. We will ask the questions and the galaxy will hear the answers, or the silence. The strategy was taking shape. It was not enough to defend their actions. They had to put the Cathar's entire business model on trial. The first session of the public inquiry began. The forum was a vast holographic space populated by the avatars of delegates from dozens of worlds. Zorgon appeared serene and confident, his robes of state shimmering. He began by painting a picture of the Cathar as galactic shepherds, guardians of stability. He spoke of the gratitude tithe not as a tax, but as a contribution to a fund that allowed them to continue their noble work. The humans in their youthful exuberance offer charity, but charity is a fleeting thing. It is a candle in the dark. We offer a sun, a perpetual light, and ask only for a little fuel to keep it burning. His words were a poem written to justify a prison. Rostova listened patiently. When it was her turn, she did not speak of philosophy. She presented facts. She showed the inquiry, the ledger's sensor logs, a precise second-by-second account of the Aurum crisis. The data was cold, hard, and irrefutable. It showed the colony's tectonic stress building for weeks, but the critical failure happening in a sudden, catastrophic cascade. It showed the ledger arriving 22 hours after the first distress call. Then she presented the Cathar's vessel, the Gilded Hand, which had arrived just 4 hours after the ledger. Tithemaster Zorgon Rostova said, her voice echoing in the virtual chamber. Your ship is a tithe collector, not a rescue vessel. Yet it arrived with remarkable speed. Can you explain how Zorgon's expression did not change? We have extensive listening posts. We monitor all distress frequencies. Rostova pressed her advantage. Your ship was already en route to this system when the distress call went out. Our long-range sensors tracked its trajectory. It changed course, but it was already close. Too close for coincidence. Silence was the only answer he could not afford. The inquiry chamber was filled with a low murmur. This was the first crack in Zorgon's narrative. The Tithe Master had been caught in a clear overstatement. He waved a dismissive hand. Our patrols are extensive. We move as needed to protect our partners. Rostova seized on the hesitation. Partners. The Aurum colony has no partnership with you. They sent a distress call to the coalition, their designated allies. She let the statement hang in the air, a challenge to the Cathar's self-appointed authority. The game had shifted. She was no longer defending her presence. She was questioning his. A merchant captain whose home world paid a heavy tithe to the Cathar sat in his dimly lit cabin watching the inquiry. He had long resented the Gilded Ones, the way they drained the life from his people with endless smiling demands. He saw the human commander, her face set with determination, and felt a flicker of hope. He had always believed the Cathar were too powerful, their legal web too intricate to escape. But now he saw a single thread being pulled, and he wondered if the whole tapestry might unravel. For the first time in a generation, he allowed himself to imagine a future without the tithe. Back on the ledger. Anya Sharma was deep in the Cathar's public financial records. They were a maze of shell corporations and holding companies, but Lex was untangling the threads. "Commander, I think I have something," she reported over the comm. "The Cathar have been buying up futures in specific raw materials, just before the systems that produce those materials suffer some kind of disaster. The profits are astronomical." It was another piece of the puzzle, another statistical improbability that pointed to something more than good fortune. The money trail was a map to the crime. Rostova knew she had to be careful. A market manipulation charge was serious, but it wasn't the heart of the matter. The real crime was the manipulation of lives. She needed to connect the financial gains to the disasters themselves. Lex cross-referenced those commodity purchases with the arrival times of Cathar rescue fleets. "I want to see the overlap. I want to see the pattern of profit and pain." The AI began the complex analysis, its processors working at incredible speed. The answer, when it came, would either be their sharpest weapon or a dead end. The second session of the inquiry was a tense affair. Zorgon came prepared. He brought forth witnesses, colonists from other worlds who spoke of the Cathar's benevolence. They told stories of timely rescues and the stability that followed. They spoke of the tithe as a small price for a guaranteed future. Rostova listened, her heart aching for these people. They were not liars. They were simply people who had been convinced that their gilded cage was a paradise. They had forgotten the sky. Freedom is only a memory to those who have never lived without chains. When her turn came, Rostova did not cross-examine the witnesses. To do so would be to attack the victims. Instead, she addressed the assembly with a simple question. "We have heard testimony of the Cathar's good works. But I ask the delegates here, how many of your worlds have suffered a natural disaster in the last 50 cycles?" The question seemed innocuous, a non sequitur, but it was a carefully laid trap. One by one, delegates began to signal their affirmation. A map of the sector lit up a constellation of tragedy. Rostova played her hand, and now she said, her voice ringing with cold clarity, "Let us overlay the Cathar's primary trade routes and patrol sectors." A new layer of light appeared on the map. The correlation was stark, undeniable. The disasters almost exclusively occurred within the Cathar's sphere of influence. Worlds outside their reach were remarkably peacefully stable. The map did not offer proof, but it painted a picture of such profound suspicion that the air in the chamber grew heavy. A coincidence once is chance, twice is suspicion, 1,000 times is a confession. Zorgon for the first time looked rattled. His mandibles worked silently, his composure finally breaking. He accused Rostova of slander, of using statistical phantoms to attack an empire's good name. But the damage was done. The delegates were murmuring, their private channels alive with sudden doubt. The seed of suspicion had been planted. Rostova had turned the inquiry from a trial of her actions into a trial of the Cathar's very existence. She had changed the question from, "Did the humans interfere?" to, "What are the Cathar truly doing?" In a quiet corner of the Aurum colony, an old man listened to the inquiry on a public terminal. He was the one who had told his granddaughter about the Gilded Ones. He had lived through the last disaster on his homeworld before he fled to Aurum. He had always suspected something was wrong, that the Cathar's luck was too good. Now, hearing the human commander lay out the pattern, he felt a vindication that was both terrifying and exhilarating. He looked at his granddaughter's drawing of the human ship. It was more than a ship. It was a promise that the ledger could be rewritten. Lex's voice came over Rostova's private channel. "Commander, the analysis is complete. The correlation between Cathar commodity investments and subsequent sector disasters is 98.7%. Furthermore, I have isolated a unique energy signature present at the epicenter of the last 3 disasters, including the one here at Aurum Prime." Rostova's blood ran cold. This was it, the smoking gun. "What is the energy signature, Lex?" The AI's reply was chilling. "It is the signature of a Cathar gravitic resonance device, a tool used for mining, or for creating precisely targeted seismic stress. They did not predict the storm. They were the storm." The revelation was a tectonic shift in their strategy. They now had proof or something very close to it. But how to present it? A direct accusation of mass murder was a dangerous path. The Cathar would deny it, and the inquiry had no power to compel a forensic investigation of their ships. Rostova needed Zorgon to confess. She needed him to condemn himself with his own words. She formulated a new plan, a daring gambit that would turn the inquiry into a courtroom and the court into a mirror. She reached out to Kenji and Anya. "We're changing our approach. We are no longer the defendant. We are the prosecution." She laid out her plan. It was risky, relying on psychology and a deep understanding of Cathar honor culture. Zorgon's pride was his greatest strength and his most profound weakness. She intended to use it against him, to make him walk into a trap of his own making. The stage was set for the final act, and the fate of a sector hung in the balance. The truth is a weapon, but it must be aimed with care. The final session of the inquiry began with an air of profound anticipation. The sector was holding its breath. Rostova let Zorgon speak first. He had regained his composure and launched into a powerful defense of his people's methods. He spoke of chaos and the Cathar's noble burden to impose order. He framed the tithe as the price of that order, a necessary contribution to the galaxy's only true shield against the void. He was painting his masterpiece of justification, and Rostova let him. When he was finished, a hush fell over the chamber. Rostova rose. She did not look at Zorgon. She addressed the assembled delegates. "We have spoken of laws and precedents, of debts and gratitude. But we have not spoken of the most fundamental law of all cause and effect." She paused, letting the words sink in. "A service rendered deserves gratitude. But what if the one offering the service is also the one who created the need for it?" The question hung in the air, a blade sharpened by all the evidence that had come before. Zorgon scoffed. "Your insinuations are baseless and insulting, Commander." Rostova finally turned to face him, her eyes locking with his. "Are they? I have a simple proposal, Tithe Master. A way to clear your good name and prove us to be the slanderers you claim we are." She projected a document into the center of the chamber. It was a legal framework for a new treaty, the Mirror Justice Accords. A pact built on the idea that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The core principle was simple and devastatingly elegant. Any empire offering aid in a disaster would agree to a full, independent audit of all their fleet movements and financial transactions for the preceding cycle. Furthermore, they would agree to open their ships to inspection for any technology that could potentially cause such a disaster. It was a pact of radical transparency, a law designed to catch the arsonist who profits from putting out the fire. And here was the trap. "We, the Coalition, will sign this accord immediately," Rostova declared. "We will open our logs, our ledgers, our very ships to prove our intentions are pure. Will you, Tithe Master Zorgon, do the same?" The challenge was absolute. If Zorgon agreed, his empire's greatest secret would be exposed. The energy signatures would be found. The financial records would confirm the pattern. His people would be condemned as the greatest criminals in galactic history. If he refused, his guilt would be all but confirmed in the court of public opinion. A refusal to prove innocence is often a proof of guilt. The delegates watched, mesmerized. The human commander had turned the tables completely. She had used the Cathar's own love of law and precedent against them, forging a new precedent that they could not escape. Zorgon was trapped. His pride demanded he accept the challenge to show the upstart humans that the Cathar feared no scrutiny. His survival demanded he refuse. For a long moment, he stood silent, the weight of 1,000 worlds on his chitinous shoulders. The inquiry was no longer about Aurum Prime. It was about the soul of the Cathar Imperium. On the bridge of the ledger, Kenji breathed. "She's got him." Anya nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. The audacity of the move was breathtaking. It was a legal checkmate. Lex's voice was a calm counterpoint to the tension. "The Tithe Master is experiencing a significant physiological stress response. Probability of accepting the accord 12%. Probability of deflecting 88%. Rostova knew the odds. She was counting on the 12%, but she was prepared for the 88%. The deflection itself would be a form of confession. Zorgon finally spoke, his voice strained. "This is an outrageous proposal, an affront to our sovereignty. We will not be subjected to such a humiliating inquisition based on the fantasies of a paranoid commander." The outburst was exactly what Rostova had hoped for. It was a refusal, and a panicked one at that. She had her answer. And now she would make sure the entire galaxy understood what it meant. The loudest denials often hide the deepest truths. "I see," Rostova said, her voice soft with a terrible finality. "You are willing to accept the gratitude of the worlds you save, but you are not willing to show them your hands." She turned back to the delegates. "The Coalition came to Aurum Prime to answer a call for help. We have presented our logs, our data, our testimony. We have offered to open ourselves to complete scrutiny. The Cathar have offered only rhetoric and refusal." She let the silence stretch a damning indictment. Then she delivered the final blow. "We are not the judges here. You are." She gestured to the assembled avatars. "Every one of you who pays the gratitude tithe. You have seen the evidence. You have seen the refusal. Now you must decide. Do you continue to pay for a shield that is also the sword? Do you fund the fire brigade that is also the arsonist?" Her words echoed in the chamber, a call to action that would not be ignored. A reckoning was not a threat. It was a promise. The inquiry ended not with a verdict, but with a schism. The feed from the chamber cut out, but the consequences were just beginning. On a dozen worlds, planetary councils convened in emergency sessions. The merchant captain, who had watched with hope, now stood before his own government, arguing passionately for a cessation of tithe payments. The old man on Aurum Prime watched as the colonial governor formally renounced any and all obligation to the Cathar Imperium. The fire had been lit. Zorgon's ship, the Gilded Hand, turned and began to move away from Aurum Prime. It did not move with the confident speed of a predator, but with the slow, sullen retreat of a defeated bully. There would be no tithe from this world, and a precedent had been set. A single human commander had shown the galaxy that a ledger could be audited, that a debt could be questioned, and that the gratitude of kings was not a chain but a choice. Anya Sharma brought up a new display on the main screen. Commander the First of the Mirror Justice Accords is coming in. The Fenris Combine. They're signing. They're demanding an audit of the Cathar. Rostova watched as another signatory appeared, and then another. A cascade was beginning. A legal revolution was sweeping the sector. The first crack in the dam had become a flood. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Rostova knew this victory was not the end of the Cathar, but it was the end of their business model. They could no longer operate in the shadows, creating the disasters from which they so nobly profited. The Mirror Justice Accord would be their cage, a prison of transparency they had helped to build with their own arrogance. They had been defeated not by weapons, but by an idea as simple and as powerful as a balanced sheet. Kenji approached her, a rare wide smile on his face. That was a masterstroke, Ava. Rostova allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Zorgon overplayed his hand. He was so used to people being grateful for the rescue that he never imagined someone would question the storm. She looked out at the golden clouds of Aurum Prime, a world now truly free. The cost had been high. The political fallout would be immense, and the Cathar would not forget this humiliation. There would be other battles, other challenges, but for now they had won. They had won by the law. They had won with a public inquiry, and they had established a new principle on the galactic stage. A principle of accountability. A principle that said you could not profit from pain without scrutiny. She keyed in her final report to Coalition Command. The subject line was simple, precedent locked. The message was even simpler. The Aurum Tithe is rescinded. The Mirror Justice Accords are in effect. The victory was not just for Aurum Prime. It was for every world that had ever been forced to pay for its own salvation. It was a victory for the very concept of a debt paid in full. Lex's voice was calm, but Rostova could almost detect a hint of satisfaction in its synthesized tones. Commander long-range sensors detect a significant realignment of Cathar fleet assets. They are withdrawing from 3 adjacent sectors. The economic models predict a 70% collapse of their tithe-based revenue stream within 1 standard year. The AI paused. Your strategy was successful beyond the projected parameters. Rostova nodded slowly, the weight of the last few cycles finally settling on her. The fight was over. The accounting was done. She thought of the young girl on the planet below, with her drawing of a starship. She hoped Alara and her people would build a future worthy of the freedom they had been given. A future where they looked to the stars, not with fear, but with hope. A future where saviors did not come with contracts and chains. A future they would build for themselves, unburdened by the gilded gratitude of a fallen empire. Rostova turned from the viewport, the reflection of the bridge lights like distant constellations in her eyes. The ledger had lived up to its name. It had balanced the books. On Aurum Prime, the public squares were filled with celebration. For the first time in memory, their sky was clear of the shadow of the gilded hand. An old man held his granddaughter's hand, pointing to the silver star that was the human ship, a steadfast guardian in the heavens. They remembered us, he whispered, a tear tracing a path through the lines on his face. The child did not fully understand, but she saw the joy in her grandfather's eyes and knew that something wonderful had happened. The heavy feeling in the air, a weight she had not even known was there, was gone. Rostova ordered the ledger to maintain its position, a silent promise to the people of Aurum. They would stay until the new political reality had solidified a against any possible Cathar retaliation. It was a cost, a deployment far longer than planned, stretching her crew and resources thin. But it was a cost she was willing to pay. A victory is not truly won until it is secured. This was the price of a lasting peace. The ship hummed around her, a living testament to a different way of being in the galaxy. A way based not on obligation, but on a shared humanity that reached across the stars. The low resonant hum of the Ledger's life support system was the only sound on the bridge. For 3 days, they had held their vigil, a silver sword hanging in the blackness above a world they had saved. The initial adrenaline of their legal victory had faded, replaced by the quiet, grinding reality of an extended watch. Resources were being monitored, duty rosters stretched thin. Victory had a price, and the first payment was time. Kenji Tanaka stood at the strategic console, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the display. Another signatory commander. The Vega Protectorate just ratified the Mirror Justice Accords. Rostova nodded, a flicker of grim satisfaction in her eyes. The fire she had lit was spreading a chain reaction of legal defiance across the quadrant. "They're scared, Eva," Kenji said, turning to face her. "And they're angry. They see the pattern now and they want blood." Rostova's expression hardened. "We didn't do this for blood. We did this for the rule of law." Her voice was quiet, but firm, a reminder of the line they had to walk. This was about justice, not vengeance, a principle that was about to be tested. The ship's primary comm channel chimed a formal, almost funereal tone. It was not a hail from Zorgon. The transmission was from a Cathar adjudicator, a legal functionary whose entire existence was dedicated to the soulless mechanics of imperial law. Even their lawyers had lawyers. The adjudicator's face appeared on the main screen. It was a younger Cathar, its carapace polished to a mirror sheen, its eyes holding a cold, dispassionate light. It did not offer greetings or pleasantries. It simply spoke. "This serves as formal notice." The adjudicator droned its voice, a dry rustle of legal scripture. "The Cathar Imperium hereby files a claim against the Sol Coalition for the full cost of our fleet's mobilization in the Aurum crisis. Our benevolent intervention was wrongfully obstructed. A debt has been incurred." A document materialized on the screen beside it, an invoice rendered in excruciatingly detailed script. They were being billed for stopping a crime. The sheer audacity of it left the bridge in stunned silence. It was a move of breathtaking cynicism, a weaponization of bureaucracy so profound it was almost beautiful. Kenji's fists clenched. "They can't be serious." Rostova stared at the invoice, her mind already dissecting the legal framework. "They are," she said softly. "They're trying to drown us in process. They'll tie us up in tribunals and arbitration for years." This was the Cathar way. If you can't win the argument, make the argument so expensive and exhausting that your opponent gives up. The process is the punishment. On the trade world of Fenris, Captain Valerius Rex watched as Cathar customs officials swarmed his freighter. His world had been the first to sign the accord, a brave act of defiance. Now he was paying the price. His cargo of medical supplies was being held up by a sudden unyielding wall of new regulations. "Form 7-Gamma is not properly notarized," a Cathar official chirped, its mandibles clicking with false sympathy. "We must quarantine the entire shipment for fungal inspection." Valerius knew there was no fungus. There was only the cold, suffocating weight of an empire's displeasure. The tithe was gone, but the chains had simply taken a new form. Aboard the Ledger, the command team gathered in the briefing room. The Cathar invoice was displayed on the central table. "It's a legal fiction," Anya Sharma stated, tracing a line of text with her finger. "But it's a well-constructed one. They're citing the Intersystem Commerce Act of 2247, the section on competitive salvage interference. It's archaic, but it's never been formally repealed. Lex's synthesized voice joined the conversation. Analysis of Cathar legal history indicates a 67% success rate in leveraging obsolete statutes to achieve favorable settlements. Their strategy is sound. The AI's cold assessment offered no comfort. A lie repeated in a courtroom. Long enough becomes a kind of truth. Rostova looked at the faces of her crew. She saw anger, frustration, and the beginnings of weariness. This was the second front of the war, a battle of attrition fought with paper and ink. She would not let them lose. "They want to send us a bill," she said, a new hard edge to her voice. "Fine. We'll send them one back." She turned to the Fleet Mine's central optic. "Lex, I want a full accounting. I want you to calculate the total cost of the Cathar's business model for the last 50 standard years." The optic glowed with a soft blue light. "Define parameters for cost." "Everything," Rostova commanded. "The market value of every resource they salvaged, the economic impact of every disaster, the estimated value of every life lost using our own coalition metrics. I want a bill for every tear shed on every world they've saved." She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. "They have created a debt of suffering. We are going to calculate it down to the last credit. We are going to create a grand tithe, and the Cathar are going to be the ones who pay it." A stack of receipts can be as devastating as a battle fleet. A profound silence fell over the room, broken only by the quiet hum of Lex's processors beginning the monumental task. The investigation began a deep dive into the digital ghost of the Cathar Imperium. Anya Sharma led the effort, her fingers flying across her console as she and Lex sifted through mountains of data. They correlated disaster reports with commodity futures, shipping manifests with seismic events. The picture that emerged was even more damning than they had imagined. It was a meticulously planned, century-long campaign of economic and social vampirism. But a question lingered. The method was too perfect. The gravitic resonance technology they used to trigger the disasters was impossibly precise. "This is not Cathar engineering," Anya muttered, staring at a spectrographic analysis of the Aurum energy signature. "Their own gravitic tech is crude, powerful, but messy. This," she zoomed in on the waveform, "this is elegant. It's surgical." It was a loose thread, a detail that didn't fit the pattern. A weapon so advanced should have left a clearer trail. Rostova authorized a deeper search, a descent into the murky world of the galactic black market and forgotten corporate archives. If you want to find the origin of a weapon, you follow the money. Meanwhile, the diplomatic pressure mounted. The Cathar adjudicator sent daily updates on the progress of their claim, each one a polite, infuriating reminder of the legal gears grinding against them. Other worlds inspired by the Accord, but frightened by the economic retaliation against Fenris, hesitated. They watched the standoff at Aurum Prime, waiting to see if the humans would fold. The fate of the sector rested not just on the ledger's strength, but on its endurance. Rostova felt the weight of those watching eyes. She could not afford to blink. A civilian teacher on the colony of New Alexandria watched the news feeds with her class of young students. They were studying galactic history, the rise and fall of empires. "Why don't the humans just shoot the bad ships?" one of her students asked, his face a picture of innocent confusion. The teacher smiled sadly. "Because, Yorick, it's easy to win a fight. It's much harder to win an argument." She pointed to the image of the ledger, a single silver ship against the vastness of space. "They are teaching the galaxy something very important, that a law can be a better shield than any weapon." The breakthrough came from a place no one expected. Lex cross-referencing the gravitic waveform against a newly recovered data cache from the dark age of human expansion found a match. It was not a perfect match, but a clear ancestral link. The technology was human in origin. It had been developed by a defunct hypercorporation called Graviton Dynamics, a company that had been dissolved for illegal weapons research over 2 centuries ago. The implications were staggering. Humanity had in some way enabled the very evil they were now fighting. The sins of the father are sometimes paid by the daughter. Anya presented the findings to Rostova in her private ready room. The commander listened in silence, her face unreadable. Graviton Dynamics. She said the name like ash in her mouth. They were stripped of their charter. Their research was supposed to have been destroyed. Anya nodded. Apparently some of it was sold on the black market. The Cathar must have acquired it, refined it over generations. This was the second cost of their victory. The knowledge that their own history was not as clean as they pretended. It was a wound to their pride, a stain on their moral high ground. For a moment, Rostova considered burying the information. It would complicate their case, give the Cathar a tool to use against them. But she dismissed the thought as quickly as it came. The ledger operated on a principle of absolute transparency. That principle had to apply to themselves most of all. "Include it," she ordered Anya. "Include it in the grand tithe. We will add a line item, a debt of responsibility. We will admit our part in this, however unintentional." It was a decision that would define them. True justice requires an honest accounting of one's own failures. Lex's calculations were complete. The grand tithe was ready. The number was beyond astronomical. It was a figure that could not be paid in currency, only in the complete and utter dissolution of an empire. It was an itemized bill for centuries of manufactured sorrow. Rostova reviewed the document, her heart heavy with the weight of the numbers. Each digit represented a life, a home, a future lost. This was not a weapon of war. It was a mirror reflecting the true face of the Cathar Imperium. The time had come to deliver the invoice, but Rostova would not send it through legal channels. She would not play the Cathar's game of endless arbitration. She would do what they had done, make it public. She ordered the ledger's communications array to be slaved to the main colonial network on Aurum Prime. They would use the planet's power to broadcast a single, unignorable message to the entire sector, a message that would bypass governments and speak directly to their people. The public ledger is the people's court. As they prepared for the broadcast, a priority alert flashed on the tactical console. The Gilded Hand, which had been holding a sullen, distant orbit, was on the move. It was accelerating towards them, its energy signatures rising. "They're powering weapons," Kenji announced, his voice tight. "Shields up, all hands to battle stations." The calm of the bridge was shattered, replaced by the urgent, controlled chaos of a red alert. The Cathar, pushed into a corner, were finally abandoning the pretense of law. Their final argument would be made with plasma and particle beams. Rostova stood at the center of the bridge, a rock in the swirling storm of activity. Her eyes were fixed on the approaching Cathar ship. Every instinct screamed at her to fire, to strike first, and end the threat. But she held back. This was Zorgon's last desperate gamble. He was trying to provoke her to turn this legal dispute into a military one. He knew he would lose the battle of ideas, so he was trying to change the battlefield. A conflict is defined by the weapons one chooses to use. "Hold your fire," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "Do not power our own weapons. Stand fast." A murmur of disbelief went through the bridge crew. To face a weaponized opponent without raising one's own shields was a violation of every tactical doctrine. "Commander," Kenji asked, his hand hovering over the firing controls. "That's an order," Kenji, Rostova said, her gaze never leaving the screen. We came here to teach a lesson about the law. We will not end it with an act of violence. She was betting everything on her belief that Zorgon was a bully, not a martyr, that he would not fire on an opponent who refused to fight. The gilded hand grew larger in the viewport, a monstrous golden predator. Its weapon ports glowed with contained energy. The distance closed. The seconds stretched into an eternity. On the bridge of the ledger, every crew member held their breath. They were defenseless, a silent, willing target. And then, just as a collision seemed inevitable, the Cathar ship began to decelerate. The glow from its weapon ports faded. It came to a halt a respectful distance away, its threat unmade. Zorgon had blinked. His final gambit had failed. He had tried to write the end of the story in fire, but Rostova refused to turn the page. Rostova let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "As you were," she said, her voice steady. "Mr. Tanaka, you may stand down the alert." She turned to her comms officer. "Begin the broadcast." The moment of violence had passed. Now came the reckoning. The ledger's powerful transmitters, amplified by the Aurum network, began to pour data into the void. It was not a plea or an argument or a declaration of war. It was a simple public posting to the Galactic ledger. A single massive invoice. The Grand Tithe. It appeared on public screens and private terminals across a dozen systems. The itemized list of the Cathar's crimes presented with the cold, passionless clarity of an accountant's spreadsheet. The names of the worlds. The dates of the disasters. The number of the dead. And at the bottom, a final, crushing number. A debt that could never be repaid. The broadcast included all of Lex's supporting data, a mountain of evidence that was now available to anyone. It even included the files on graviton dynamics, a public admission of humanity's own small part in the tragedy. The truth once released cannot be recalled. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The coalition of worlds holding the Mirror Justice Accords swelled as hesitant systems now rushed to sign. On Fenris, the Cathar inspectors vanished from the spaceport, their authority suddenly evaporated. The merchant captain, Valerius Rex, watched as his cargo was finally released, the local port authority overriding the Cathar with a newfound confidence. The gilded chains had not just been broken, they had melted away. The power of the Cathar was built on a carefully constructed illusion of legitimacy, and Rostova had shattered it with a single undeniable truth. On the bridge of the Gilded Hand, Tithe Master Zorgon watched the broadcast, his ancient carapace seeming to shrink. He had been defeated not by a superior fleet, but by a superior argument. He had lost the story. The humans had not come as conquerors, but as auditors. They had looked at his empire's books and found them wanting. A recall order from his own high command flashed on his private screen. His career was over. His empire, as he knew it, was over. The gratitude of kings is a measured thing, but the judgment of the public is absolute. The ledger remained in orbit for another week, a silent guardian ensuring the peaceful transition. The Gilded Hand slunk away, not to be replaced. The Cathar Imperium, facing economic collapse and a galactic crisis of faith, had turned inward, its long reign of gilded terror at an end. Rostova stood on the bridge, watching as the final signatory to the accord was logged. The precedent was locked. The sector was free. The cost had been a long and stressful deployment, and the uncomfortable revelation of their own flawed history. But the victory felt earned. It felt real. Rostova walked to the forward viewport, gazing down at the golden world below. She thought of the little girl Ilara and the future she would now inherit. A future where help did not come with a hidden price tag. A future built on the radical idea that the strong had a duty to protect the weak, not to prey on them. It was a simple idea, but it was the foundation of everything the coalition stood for. An idea worth fighting for, not with guns, but with principles, and with ledgers. The main screen behind her displayed the grand tithe entry, a permanent mark on the public record of the galaxy. Beside the impossibly large number, a single line of text blinked updated moments ago by the Cathar's shattered government. It was a promise of payment that would take centuries to fulfill, but it was an acknowledgement. It was an admission. The mirror arrays on the ledger's hull, which had broadcasted the massive data packet, finally cooled their faint residual glow, fading into the black. Justice is not a sword. It is a scale. It does not seek to punish, but to balance. For centuries, the books of this galaxy were cooked, the numbers rigged in favor of the predators. Today we posted a correction. We did not burn their empire to the ground. We simply handed them the bill. Because a debt is not a weapon to be wielded forever. It is a thing to be paid. The goal is not a universe of masters and servants, but a universe of equals where everyone begins the day with a clean slate. The books are finally balanced.